There are moments in life that divide your existence into two distinct halves: the life you thought you were living and the brutal reality waiting in the shadows. It was a freezing Thursday morning in late January. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my office on the 42nd floor of the Apex Tower. I was sitting at my desk with a fresh cup of coffee, looking out over the gray skyline. At 36, I was the co-founder and chief technology officer of Dynamics. We were a clean energy research firm that had spent the last 7 years developing something revolutionary: the Sol-Core battery cell. It was a clean, ultra-dense energy storage system capable of holding 4 times the charge of standard lithium-ion batteries at a fraction of the cost. I had given my life to this invention. I spent 80-hour weeks in sterile underground laboratories, missed holidays, burned through my personal savings, and nearly ruined my health to refine the chemical balance of that patent. It was my life's work. Then came the heavy knock on my office door. Before I could answer, 2 men in tailored charcoal suits stepped into the room. They weren't employees. They didn't smile. The taller man carried a thick leather briefcase stamped with an official silver seal: United States Patent and Trademark Office, DEPT, of Commerce Enforcement Division. "Ethan Cross?" the taller man asked, his voice flat and uncompromising. "Yes," I said, standing up from my chair. "Can I help you?" "I'm Special Auditor Richard Vance from the Federal Intellectual Property Enforcement Bureau," he said, placing a heavy document folder onto my desk. "We are serving you with an immediate cease and desist order, along with a formal notification of a federal audit regarding patent number US 9948221B2. I frowned, laughing nervously. "There must be a mistake, Auditor Vance. That's the primary patent for our Sol-Core technology. I personally filed it 4 years ago. Dynamics owns the exclusive global rights." Auditor Vance didn't laugh. He opened the folder and flipped to the 3rd page, pointing a pen at an official filing record dated 3 weeks prior. "As of 21 days ago, Mr. Cross, patent US 9948221B2 is no longer registered under Dynamics." The full title, trade secrets, and manufacturing schematics were transferred via an irrevocable intellectual property assignment contract to Vanguard Global Energy for the sum of $75 million. The world seemed to stop turning. The hum of the air conditioner faded into a high-pitched buzzing in my ears. Vanguard Global Energy was our fiercest, most ruthless competitor, a multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerate known for buying out smaller tech firms and burying their clean energy patents to protect their coal and oil monopolies. "That's impossible," I shouted, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. "An assignment of that magnitude requires my explicit consent. I'm the primary inventor and 50% shareholder of this company." Auditor Vance turned the page. "The transfer document bears the corporate seal of Dynamics, along with the signature of your chief executive officer and co-founder, David Sterling. It also includes an executed power of attorney affidavit signed by you, relinquishing all individual inventor oversight." I stared at the document. There, at the bottom of the page, was my signature. It was an exact, digital replica of my legal signature, but I had never seen this document in my life. I had never signed away my patent. I had never agreed to sell our technology to Vanguard. David Sterling, my best friend since our freshman year at MIT, the man who stood as the best man at my wedding, the man I trusted with my life and career, had forged my signature and secretly sold my life's work to our worst enemy. My mind raced back through the last 7 years. When David and I founded Dynamics, we made a pact over a cheap slice of pizza in a tiny rented basement apartment. I was the brain, he was the businessman. I agreed to handle the science, the lab teams, and the patent filings, while David handled the venture capitalists, the corporate structuring, and the media. "We're a team, Ethan," David used to say, slapping me on the shoulder whenever we landed a new investment round. "You build the future, and I'll make sure nobody takes it from us." Over the last year, however, David had changed. He started wearing $5,000 custom suits, drove a rare European sports car, and frequented high society galas. While I was down in the lab wearing a dirty lab coat covered in electrolyte residue, David was living like a billionaire CEO on company credit. 2 months ago, Vanguard Global Energy made a predatory buyout offer for Etha Dynamics. They offered us $50 million to sell the company outright. I immediately rejected it at our board meeting. I knew Vanguard didn't want to build our batteries. They wanted to lock the patent in a vault so their fossil fuel investments wouldn't lose value. I remembered David's furious expression that afternoon. "You're an idealistic fool, Ethan." He had spat at me in the hallway after the board meeting. $50 million is generational wealth. Who cares if they bury the battery? We get paid. "I care, David," I had told him, standing firm. "This battery can power millions of homes without pollution. It's not for sale." David had calmed down the next day, apologizing profusely, telling me he was just stressed about payroll. He even brought me a cup of coffee and asked me to sign a stack of routine regulatory compliance forms for the upcoming federal grant application. I remembered signing those routine pages in a rush, trusting my best friend implicitly. He had slipped the power of attorney signature page right into that stack of mundane regulatory forms. I picked up my desk phone, my hand trembling with a mixture of raw fury and sickening dread. I dialed David's private line. He answered on the second ring, his voice relaxed, accompanied by the background sound of ice clinking in a crystal glass. "Ethan, what's up, partner? Did the lab reports come back for the Phase 3 testing?" "David," I said, forcing my voice to remain as steady as stone. "I am standing in my office with Special Auditor Vance from the Federal Intellectual Property Bureau. He is holding a contract showing that you sold the Solcor patent to Vanguard Global Energy for $75 million. Silence descended on the line. The clinking of ice stopped immediately. "Ethan, look," David began, his tone shifting from friendly warmth to smooth, corporate condescension. "I was going to explain everything to you next week after the final wire cleared. You need to look at the big picture here." "You forged my signature," I screamed, slamming my fist onto the desk. "You stole my patent. You sold out our vision to the very monsters who tried to destroy us." "Oh, grow up, Ethan," David snapped, dropping all pretense of regret. "Your vision doesn't pay for multi-million-dollar marketing campaigns. Vanguard offered $75 million cash. The wire went through an offshore holding account in the Cayman Islands. $50 million went to the company account, and $25 million was a private consulting bonus for negotiating the deal." "A private bonus?" I gasped, blood rushing to my ears. "You took a $25 million kickback to hand over our tech." "I took what I earned," David sneered. "I built this company's valuation. You just played with chemicals in a basement. What were you going to do? Spend the next 10 years fighting for market share while taking a modest salary? I saved us 10 years of work. The deal is closed, Ethan. The paperwork is filed with the Federal Registry. Vanguard owns the patent now. There's nothing you can do." "I will sue you into non-existence, David," I whispered. "I will go to the press. I will go to the federal prosecutor." David let out a dry, chilling laugh. "Go ahead, try it. You signed the power of attorney, Ethan. I have 3 notary stamps on those documents. To the legal system, you signed off on the transfer. If you try to fight Vanguard's legal team, they will bleed you dry in court fees before you even get an arraignment date. Accept your half of the corporate payout, take your millions, and shut your mouth. Don't ruin your life over pride." The line went dead. I stood there in the quiet office, holding the silent phone. Auditor Vance looked at me with a cold, professional pity. "Mr. Cross," Vance said quietly, gathering his papers, "unless you can produce ironclad, undeniable forensic proof that the transfer was fraudulent before the official federal registration seal is finalized on federal audit day next Tuesday, Vanguard will take legal possession of all lab equipment, prototypes, and schematics. You will be barred from entering your own building." "When is the final seal set?" I asked, looking him dead in the eye. "Tuesday morning at 9:00 a.m., Vance replied. At the Federal Patent Bureau headquarters downtown. Vanguard's executive board and Mr. Sterling will be there to finalize the transfer in front of the regional director. I looked out the window, at the rain pouring over the city. They won't finalize a thing, I said softly. I built that technology from nothing, and I'm going to tear down David Sterling's empire brick by single brick. I had 4 days before federal audit day. I knew that fighting David through standard corporate litigation would be financial suicide. Vanguard Global Energy had a legal department staffed by 200 corporate attorneys whose sole job was to stall lawsuits until the independent party ran out of money. If I hired a standard corporate lawyer, David's high-priced legal team would tie me up in depositions for 5 years, while Vanguard produced the battery under their own name. I needed to strike at the one place David's money and lawyers couldn't protect him, the technical architecture of the patent itself. That night, I moved all my personal research files, private server backups, and physical lab notebooks out of the company building before David's newly hired security guards could revoke my access keycard. I moved everything into a secure, off-grid workshop in an industrial warehouse district on the edge of town. I called Marcus Reed. Marcus was a former senior forensic cybersecurity analyst for the Department of Defense who had left the government to start an independent intelligence firm. He was a ruthless digital investigator who specialized in corporate espionage and blockchain tracking. Most importantly, he owed me a massive personal favor. 3 years ago, my battery prototypes had saved his daughter's life support system during a catastrophic regional power outage. At midnight, Marcus arrived at my workshop carrying 2 heavy black military-grade laptop cases. David Sterling played dirty, Ethan, Marcus said, setting his gear down on the workbench and plugging in his systems. He thinks he used clean offshore accounts and untraceable shell companies in the Caymans to hide his $25 million kickback. But nobody moves $25 million without leaving a digital footprint. Where do we start? I asked, pouring 2 mugs of strong black coffee. We start with the signature, Marcus said, pulling up a high-resolution scan of the power of attorney affidavit David had submitted to the patent office. Marcus ran the digital file through an advanced forensic vector analysis program. Within seconds, a series of red mathematical lines overlaid my signature on the screen. Look here, Marcus pointed at the screen. A genuine human signature always has microscopic variations in stroke pressure, acceleration curve, and microtremors caused by your hand moving across paper. This signature on David's document doesn't have any variations. It's a 100% pixel-perfect digital vector duplicate of the signature you used on Etha Dynamics' corporate incorporation charter 4 years ago. Can we prove he copy-pasted it digitally? I asked. Oh, it gets better, Marcus smiled darkly. He didn't just copy-paste it. He used an online PDF editing suite hosted on Etha Dynamics' internal server network to overlay your signature onto the assignment document. And the idiot forgot that our internal servers log every single keystroke, user session, and file modification timestamp. Marcus typed rapidly into his terminal. A list of server audit logs flashed across his monitor in green text. Here it is, Marcus declared triumphantly. On November 12th at 11:42 p.m., a time when lab security footage shows you were at home sleeping, David Sterling logged into the administrative portal using his master credentials. He opened the file Patent Transfer Vanguard, PDF, uploaded your saved signature file Ethan Signature Master, PNG, flattened the document, and sent it directly to Vanguard's legal team. I stared at the green text on the screen. That's absolute proof of forgery. It's proof, but in a civil court, David's lawyers will argue the server logs were tampered with by an angry co-founder. You, Marcus warned, leaning back in his chair. If you want to destroy him and stop Vanguard from taking the patent on federal audit day, we need the financial smoking gun. We need to tie the $25 million kickback directly to Vanguard's executive board. For the next 72 hours, Marcus and I didn't sleep for more than 2 hours a night. We survived on cold coffee and adrenaline. Marcus used deep-level blockchain analysis to trace the $75 million wire transfer from Vanguard's corporate treasury through 3 separate intermediary banking nodes in Zurich, London, and Grand Cayman. On Sunday night, just 36 hours before the federal deadline, we hit the mother lode. The $25 million kickback hadn't just been paid to David Sterling as an individual. The wire transfer had been authorized directly by Victor Vance, the CEO of Vanguard Global Energy himself, and attached to the encrypted wire transfer instructions was a secret side agreement, a digital document signed by both David and Victor Vance. The document was titled Project Extinction, Patent Suppression Agreement. My jaw dropped as I read the terms on the screen. Vanguard wasn't planning to manufacture my Sol-Core battery. The secret agreement explicitly stated that upon successful transfer of the patent on Federal Audit Day, Vanguard would immediately lock the schematics in an vault, dismantle the research facility, fire all lab personnel, and destroy all existing prototypes. In exchange for ensuring the technology never reached the public market, David Sterling was to receive an additional $10 million stock option payout every year for the next 5 years. They weren't just stealing my work. They were murdering the technology to protect their corporate profits. "This isn't just corporate fraud anymore, Ethan," Marcus said, his voice deadly serious as he printed out the encrypted logs and site agreements. "Suppressing a clean energy technology that received federal research grants is a direct violation of the Federal Energy Integrity Act of 2026. This is a severe federal crime." I grabbed the thick stack of printed evidence and packed it neatly into an aluminum briefcase. "David thought he was selling my battery to the highest bidder," I said, a cold, calm smile spreading across my face. "He has no idea that on Tuesday morning he's walking into his own trap." Monday passed in a blur of silent tactical preparation. I didn't call David. I didn't contact Vanguard. I let them believe that I was defeated, hiding in my apartment, weeping over my lost life's work. On Monday afternoon, David sent an email to the entire company staff at Deceit Dynamics. The email announced his proud restructuring agreement with Vanguard Global Energy. He thanked the employees for their hard work, announced that the main research lab would be shut down indefinitely by the end of the week, and offered everyone a meager 2-week severance package. He framed himself as a visionary leader who had successfully brought the company to a multi-million-dollar exit. When my lab technicians and engineers called me in tears, asking how I could let this happen, I told them only one thing: don't pack your boxes yet. Be at the Federal Patent Bureau building tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. By Monday evening, Marcus Vance, the special auditor from the Federal Intellectual Property Bureau, received an anonymous, heavily encrypted digital package sent directly to his secure federal portal. Attached was the vector forensic analysis of my forged signature, the internal server modification timestamps, the Zurich banking wire routing logs, and the secret Project Extinction Suppression Agreement. Along with the package was a short, simple note from me. "Auditor Vance, do not cancel tomorrow's final signing ceremony. Let them sign the registration book first, then close the doors." At 8:00 a.m. on Tuesday morning, I woke up, shaved, and put on my finest charcoal gray suit. I adjusted my tie in the mirror. Looking back at me wasn't the tired, overworked scientist who had let himself be pushed around by slick businessmen for 7 years. Looking back was a man who had built something great and who was fully prepared to defend it with absolute brutality. The Federal Patent and Trademark Bureau headquarters was a massive, intimidating stone structure located in the center of the financial district. Its high ceilings, marble columns, and polished brass fixtures were designed to project the absolute authority of the United States government. Room 402 on the 4th floor was the Executive Registration Suite, the room where high-value, multi-million-dollar intellectual property assignments were finalized and stamped into the permanent Federal Register. I arrived at 8:30 a.m. Standing outside the heavy mahogany doors of room 402 were my lab team, 20 engineers and researchers who had dedicated years of their lives to the Solcore battery. They looked anxious and uncertain, standing in their simple coats among the opulent marble hallway. "Ethan," my lead chemical engineer, Sarah, rushed over to me. "What is going on? David told us the building is being closed by security tomorrow. Is it true? Is Vanguard shutting us down?" I put a hand on her shoulder and smiled reassuringly. "Sarah, gather everyone and wait inside the back of the gallery room. Trust me, today you are going to see what 7 years of hard work is actually worth." At 8:45 a.m., the elevator doors at the end of the hall opened with a quiet chime. Out stepped David Sterling. He looked like a man on top of the world. He wore a brand-new three-piece Italian suit, a gold watch glittering on his wrist, and a smug, arrogant grin spread across his face. Flanking him were 3 high-powered corporate lawyers carrying leather document bags, along with Victor Vance, the billionaire CEO of Vanguard Global Energy, and his private legal entourage. They walked down the marble hallway like conquerors entering a defeated city. When David saw me standing outside the heavy mahogany doors, he stopped. He chuckled, shook his head, and walked right up to me, pulling his gold cufflinks straight. "Ethan," David said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "I didn't think you'd actually show up. I thought you'd be at home packing up your lab gear. Are you here to watch me sign the final papers? Or did you come to beg Victor for an advisory job?" Victor Vance, the billionaire CEO, looked at me with cold indifference, as if I were a minor nuisance blocking his path to a profitable deal. "Is this the inventor, David? Make sure he doesn't cause a scene. I have an 10:00 a.m. flight to Aspen." "Don't worry, Victor," David smiled smoothly, patting Victor's shoulder. "Ethan knows his place. He's a scientist, not a fighter." David stepped right up to my ear, whispering so only I could hear. "You lost, Ethan. In 15 minutes, my bank account clears 25 million more and your precious battery becomes legal trash. You should have taken the quiet exit." I looked David straight in his eyes. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. "Sign the book first, David," I whispered back with a cold smile. "Make sure you put your full legal name on it." David sneered, brushed past me, and pushed open the heavy mahogany doors of room 402. Room 402 was designed like an upscale judicial chamber. At the far end of the room sat an elevated oak dais where the regional director of the Federal Patent Bureau presided. Below the dais was a long conference table equipped with formal signing books, legal seals, and recording microphones. Behind the table stood Special Auditor Richard Vance, flanked by 2 federal staff members holding digital recording tablets. My lab team filed quietly into the back row of gallery seats, sitting in tense silence. David Sterling and Victor Vance took their seats at the front of the long mahogany table, surrounded by their 5 corporate attorneys. They laid out the crisp, white legal pages of the final transfer agreement. I walked down the central aisle and took a seat at a small table on the far left side of the room, placing my aluminum briefcase flat on the desk. At 8:58 a.m., Regional Director Harold Brooks, a stern, gray-haired man in his 60s, stepped out from his private chamber and sat down behind the main oak dais. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at the assembled group. "Good morning, gentlemen," Director Brooks began, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. "We are here today for the final administrative execution and federal registration seal of patent assignment US 994821B2, transferring full rights from Etha Dynamics to Vanguard Global Energy Corporation." Director Brooks looked down at David Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, as CEO of Etha Dynamics, are you prepared to formally execute this transfer and affirm under penalty of perjury that all shareholder approvals, inventor waivers, and corporate authorizations have been lawfully secured?" David stood up proudly, adjusting his suit jacket. "I am Director Brooks. All documentation has been submitted, audited, and verified. Etha Dynamics is fully prepared to complete the transfer." "Very well," Director Brooks said, gesturing to the heavy leather ledger on the table. You may sign the Federal Final Master Register." David stepped forward with a golden fountain pen. With a flourish of his hand, he signed his full legal name on the master federal line, stamped it with the corporate seal of Etha Dynamics, and stepped back with a triumphantly smug grin. Victor Vance stepped forward next, signing his name as the representative buyer for Vanguard Global Energy. "The signatures are recorded," Director Brooks announced, lifting his wooden gavel. "If there are no formal objections, I will now apply the Federal Registry stamp, making this transaction legally absolute and unappealable." "Director Brooks," I said, my voice ringing out like a crystal bell across the silent courtroom, "I raise a formal objection under Section 12 of the Federal Energy Integrity Act." David let out a loud, theatrical laugh, turning around to look at the gallery. "Director, please ignore him. Ethan Cross is a disgruntled minority shareholder who is upset about a corporate buyout. He has no standing here." Vanguard's head attorney immediately stood up, slamming his hand onto the table. "Objection, Director. Mr. Cross has relinquished his administrative power of attorney. He has no legal right to interrupt a Federal Registry proceeding." Director Brooks didn't look at David or his lawyer. He looked straight at Special Auditor Richard Vance, who was standing beside the dais. Auditor Vance stepped forward, holding a remote control. He clicked a button. The heavy double mahogany doors at the back of room 402 automatically locked with a loud, metallic strike. Two armed federal marshals stepped out from the side doors and stood directly in front of the locked exit. The smug grin on David's face suddenly flickered. The 5 corporate attorneys for Vanguard looked at each other in sudden, sharp alarm. "What is the meaning of this?" Victor Vance demanded, standing up furiously. "I am the chief executive of a Fortune 500 company. You cannot lock us in this room." "Sit down, Mr. Vance," Director Brooks said, his voice dropping into a register of terrifying, cold authority. "This is no longer a standard administrative signing. Special Auditor Vance, present the forensic exhibit package." Auditor Vance pressed another button on his remote. A massive high-definition projector screen lowered from the ceiling directly behind the oak dais. The lights in room 402 dimmed automatically. A glowing, high-resolution vector analysis of the forged power of attorney affidavit appeared on the screen, zoomed in on my signature in bright red lines. "At 11:42 p.m. on November 12th, Auditor Vance announced, his voice echoing through the silent room, "an administrative user account belonging to Mr. David Sterling accessed the secure digital server of Etha Dynamics. Server forensic logs show that Mr. Sterling digitally extracted an image file of Mr. Ethan Cross's signature, artificially flattened it onto the power of attorney assignment, and submitted it to our database." David's face went completely ash-white. That's a lie. My server was hacked. Someone planted those logs." "Silence," Director Brooks thundered, slamming his wooden gavel down. Auditor Vance clicked the remote again. A second document appeared on the screen. It was the Zurich banking wire routing trail, displaying the movement of $75 million from Vanguard's corporate treasury into the Cayman Islands shell account. Highlighted in bright yellow was the $25 million private kickback paid directly to David Sterling. Gasps erupted from the lab technicians sitting in the gallery. "And finally," Auditor Vance continued, clicking to the final slide, "we have the encrypted site agreement titled Project Extinction, signed jointly by Mr. David Sterling and Mr. Victor Vance." The text of the secret suppression agreement flashed across the screen in huge, bold letters. "Upon final registration seal, Vanguard Global Energy shall immediately dismantle the Solcor research facility, destroy all PROTOTYPES, and permanently suppress patent US 9948221B2 to protect existing fossil fuel market INTERSTS." Victor Vance, the billionaire CEO, collapsed back into his leather chair, his mouth hanging open in complete shock. His corporate lawyers immediately backed away from him, pulling out their private notepads and frantically writing notes, realizing in an instant that their client was caught in a massive federal conspiracy trap. David Sterling was shaking so violently that he had to grip the edge of the mahogany table to keep from falling to the floor. Tears of sheer terror began to leak from his eyes, ruining his slick corporate image. "Ethan, please," David stammered, looking toward me with desperation, his voice trembling like a child's. "Ethan, we're partners. We can fix this. We can renegotiate the deal. I'll give you $20 million of the kickback. We can share it." I stood up slowly from my desk. I walked down the center aisle until I was standing right in front of David Sterling. I looked down at the man who had traded 7 years of brotherhood, innovation, and scientific progress for a pile of dirty offshore money. "You didn't just forge my name, David," I said softly, my voice carrying the weight of 7 years of hard work. "You tried to murder the future. You sold out our team, you sold out our vision, and you sold out me. You told me on the phone that I was just a scientist who played with chemicals in a basement." I gestured toward the massive screen displaying his crimes. "Well, David, this is what happens when the scientist decides to audit the businessman." Director Brooks picked up his wooden gavel. His face was set like concrete. "By authority of the United States Federal Intellectual Property Enforcement Bureau," Director Brooks declared, "Patent Assignment US 9948221B2 is hereby rejected and voided due to criminal fraud and forgery. Full and exclusive rights to patent US 9948221B2 are restored solely to the primary inventor, Mr. Ethan Cross." Bang! The sound of the gavel striking the wooden block echoed across the room like a gunshot. "Furthermore," Director Brooks continued, looking down at the federal marshals standing at the back of the room, "under the provisions of the Federal Energy Integrity Act and the Criminal Identity Theft Statute, I am remanding Mr. David Sterling and Mr. Victor Vance into immediate federal custody pending grand jury indictment." The two federal marshals stepped forward. Metal handcuffs gleamed under the bright fluorescent lights. The spectacle that followed was a masterclass in swift, unyielding justice. The marshals walked right up to David Sterling. David began to weep uncontrollably, blubbering excuses as his arms were pulled behind his back and the cold steel cuffs clicked tightly around his wrists. "Ethan, help me. Call my lawyer. Tell them it was a mistake." David shrieked as he was dragged away, his $5,000 suit rumpled, his hair messy, his polished corporate facade completely destroyed. Victor Vance, the arrogant billionaire CEO who had claimed he had a 10:00 a.m. flight to Aspen, was forced to put his hands behind his back as well. His team of 5 high-priced lawyers stood by in total silence, refusing to say a word in his defense to avoid being named as co-conspirators in a federal suppression plot. My lab team stood up in the gallery and erupted into thunderous applause. Sarah and the other engineers were crying tears of pure relief, hugging each other as they watched the corporate predators who had tried to destroy their livelihoods being led out of the room in handcuffs. Within 48 hours, the news of the scandal blew up across global media headlines. Vanguard Energy CEO and AETHER Dynamics, CEO, ARRESTED in massive federal patent fraud and suppression scheme. Vanguard Global Energy's stock price plummeted by 40% in a single day as federal prosecutors opened a wider investigation into their historic acquisitions. Victor Vance was forced to resign in disgrace by his board of directors before facing federal charges of conspiracy, corporate bribery, and suppression of clean energy technology. David Sterling's downfall was absolute. Because the $25 million kickback had been seized by the federal government under asset forfeiture laws, David was left completely penniless. His offshore accounts were frozen, his European sports car was repossessed, and his high society friends abandoned him instantly. 3 months later, facing a mountain of undeniable forensic evidence, David pled guilty to felony forgery, grand larceny, and federal fraud. He was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. Etha Dynamics was dissolved, but from its ashes, I founded Solcor Technologies, this time as the sole proprietor and CEO. I restructured the company so that every single scientist, engineer, and lab technician held real, voting equity shares in the patents they helped create. No single executive, not even me, could ever sell or suppress our technology behind closed doors again. 1 year after that explosive morning in room 402, I stood on an elevated gantry inside our brand-new 200,000 square foot automated manufacturing facility on the outskirts of the city. Below me, bright robotic arms welded silver casings together, assembling thousands of Sol-Core battery cells per day. Our first commercial production run was shipping out to power clean electric transit buses, rural solar grids, and affordable housing developments across 3 states. Sarah, now my vice president of engineering, walked up beside me on the gantry, handing me a digital tablet displaying our quarterly output numbers. "We just hit our 1 millionth battery unit, Ethan," she said, beaming with pride. "And 3 international energy boards just signed distribution contracts for next year." I looked down at the bustling factory floor. The air was clean, filled with the rhythmic hum of high-tech machinery and the cheerful voices of 200 workers who knew their work was actually changing the world. I remembered the cold, desperate nights spent in my off-grid workshop, staring at server logs, wondering if a simple scientist could ever stand up against $75 million of corporate corruption. Many people believe that money, power, and slick legal contracts give corrupt people absolute control over the world. They believe that if someone has enough wealth, they can buy your work, forge your name, erase your vision, and bury the truth in an offshore account. But they forget one fundamental law of nature: greed makes people sloppy. When you build something with real passion, honesty, and blood, you know every single gear, every line of code, and every atom of its structure. A thief can steal a document, forge a signature, and buy a corporate suit, but they can never steal the spirit of the person who built it. When the storm comes and the masks fall away, money cannot buy back integrity. And when you stand your ground and fight for what is right, the truth doesn't just prevail. It tears down the quiet traps built in the dark and lights the way forward for everyone else.